Well, good morning, everybody. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 3 and also broadcasting on McDuff Lives 1 and Facebook at McDuff Lives. And this morning, I'm happy to bring back to the show Peter Duke of the Duke Report, a world-renowned photographer, a real expert at internet and graphics and all kinds of things that are important to communication in our world today. And his venture called the Duke Report is really taking off on the internet. So I want to update with Peter and see how's he doing. But before we do that, I have to say congratulations on your recent marriage, sir.
Well, gee whiz, thank you very much. We're very happy, and we live streamed it because so many people were asking about it, and we were kind of surprised that hundreds of people have watched it on the different channels that it's on. So, thank you very much.
Well, all right, and onward and upward. You know, the Duke Report I see it on Twitter, and you can subscribe to it at thedukereport.com. It's really taken off. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised because of your deep background in such things. But tell us how's things going as far as is it getting a broader reach? Are you keeping a statistical eye on it, and is it look like something that you're going to really be pushing forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We get more traffic. It's up and down, but we get more traffic every day. We probably have double the traffic now that we had 6 weeks ago, and so if we can double every 6 weeks, that'll be pretty good. We do not use Google Analytics. We use a package called Modimo. And Modimo doesn't sell. It's basically you have to pay for it. Google Analytics, what they do is they make it free so that they can sell your data to everybody on the internet. We pay for our own analytics. We use Modimo Analytics, and so we can't pay attention to what's going on. We don't track anyone down to the individual IP number. That is, I don't know what anybody's individual IP number is, although I could turn that on if I wanted to, but we choose not to, and we reflect that in our privacy policy. And then we also use a private commenting system called Hivor. Hivor is, again, a lot of commenting systems run on something called Discuss, and Discuss has a business model that's very similar to Google. Where they give you your ability to have commenting for free, but they sell the data and they sell ads against the data that they're collecting. So we try to keep everything in-house. We like to pay attention to what's going on. It's kind of like having instruments on an airplane or a boat. You need to know where you're going, but you don't necessarily need to share that information with the rest of the world. So that's the way that we track that stuff. And just to, I at the risk of repetition ad nauseum, the Duke Report is ostensibly an aggregator, meaning that all of the news that's on the Duke Report they are all RSS feeds, real simple syndication. And what I do is the only thing that I curate really is the story that's at the top of the page. I try to find a story every day that I think will be of interest. And then the rest of the site is pretty much automated. It's pulling content in. Whenever you post a new video, it automatically changes it on the Duke Report. If people have missed one of the things that you've done, they can click on last 10 stories and click on John OLoughlin, and then it will, or it might be under McDuff. I don't remember. And it will show, the last 10 things that you did. So the reason that I created the website is because my wife got banned off of Twitter because she had the hashtag Stop the Steal in her Twitter bio.
Oh,
and she was having a hard time keeping up with what was going on in the world. And I started to show her how to use a feed reader, which is a way to aggregate RSS feeds, which is something that today, probably the only people who use feed readers are journalists, but you can also take those feeds and you can expose them as a web page. And so that's what the Duke Report is. It's basically like a feed reader for everyone. And the things that are on the Duke Report are the sources that I pay attention to. And I try to stay away from kind of polarizing content. That is, you and I have talked about this before. I think the dialectic is kind of the enemy of democracy, and sides that only cater to one side of an issue in order to sell ads or to influence the democracy are not of much interest to me. So as much as I liked Andrew Breitbart, and he was kind of my inspiration for this, Breitbart isn't a feed on the Duke Report. I try to stick with kind of smaller independent voices who in a lot of cases are specialists in particular areas. So that way I kind of keep the voices focused on evidence-based journalism as opposed to what I call red meat red meat for lemmings. Kind of drink some coffee here.
Well, yes, but the lemmings are hungry, and that's what sells, right? That's the next question. And you're putting a lot of time and effort into this. Is there a subscription model, or is there are you taking donations? How are you financing this?
Yeah, well, we will get there. I Buy Me a Coffee has, there are a few great supporters out there in the world who use the Buy Me a Coffee link, and they buy coffee. I have a store where I sell T-shirts. I can tell. I mean, I think that I'm pretty good at understanding how the technology works and everything. I believe that I still have to sit down and do the numbers, but finger in the air, I think the site makes more money than it costs right now. And I realize that there's got to be an audience building process. And so to that end, monetization will come when I've got, my end goal would be the Drudge Report, which is, obviously the model for this type of content, which is the most successful aggregator, might be the most successful website on the internet in history, as far as the amount of traffic that it drove. That business model was very simple. Matt Drudge was generating 25 million page views a day, and he would put one ad on the top of the website, and that ad paid for everything, because when you've got that much volume, then you don't need to have more than one ad on the website. And so, if I can get my traffic up to 2 or 3 magnitudes, then I can put an ad up and I can make some money. But at this point, I'm just trying to gather traffic. So one of the things that I did last week is that we bought the domain name Duke Report. So there was a guy who started a Duke basketball website. I think he started it, 10 or 15 years ago. And I think he was probably a college student when he started it. And he no longer wanted to maintain it anymore. And he kind of reached out to me and asked me if I wanted the domain name. Well, I bought the domain name and my traffic has doubled. Now, I'm sure that a huge percentage of those people are probably Duke basketball fans, and they're probably a little annoyed that when they type in Duke Report, they wind up getting this crazy news site. But on the other hand, I think that I talked to a lot of people who were mistyping it because Drudge Report is not the Drudge Report. It's just Drudge Report.
Uh-huh.
And people were thinking, oh, it's like the Drudge Report. And then they were typing it in and they're getting this weird basketball website. So I bought the domain name. The guy had it, he wanted a fair price. I gave him a fair price for it. And lo and behold, I think that my traffic is probably up 40%, 50% from before I owned the domain name. So, little things, you do little things, and it gets a little bit better each week. Speed is always very important to me. The site does load very fast for most people, except that there's one constituent group of people of which I'm a member. And that is, for some reason, if you go to the site several hundred times a week, the cookies or whatever it is that's setting it start to mess up the ability for the browser to load. So that's the top of my to-do list, is to try to figure that out. But it really only affects people. It only affects my best customers. So,
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
Well, I've got to schedule a consultation with you because a lot of those issues you just talked about they seem like roadblocks to me, and I'm anxious to improve my own reach, and I am very grateful to you to include me at the DukeReport.com along with so many other really great and independent voices, and that's what we try to do, is to keep it independent and to be fair. I think what I want to do is just to add what I've studied all my life, which is American political history and philosophy and government, and to try to apply that to our current problem. I'm not somebody that's going to go out to Kosovo and knock on doors. But I think that the way that we got to Kosovo is something that we can study as a kind of a result of our history. And along those lines, the past week and a half or so, I've been on a kind of a tear of my own, digging into the subject of Fabian socialism. I know that you and I have talked about Fabianism in the context of the Fabian Society and the background of H.G. Wells and the Webbs and the Fabian Society itself. And we had a great discussion last night with David Underdown about that, and we had a visit from the dreaded Fabian turtle that is taking over the world, slowly, but when he he strikes hard. and so that's the plan, is that they've been insinuating and putting in sleeper agents and everything.
Is that the tortoise that Rothschild was riding? I think
Oh,
there's a famous photo of one of the Rothschilds, the Lord Rothschilds, riding a giant tortoise in his yard.
oh, that's right. I hadn't made that connection, but it certainly could be. It could
Yeah.
be. But that's one of their symbols, is the tortoise. The tortoise that wins the race by
Hmm.
steady but slow progress.
Sure.
Or the
Aesop's fables, right?
Fabian Society, named after the legendary General Fabius, who defeated his enemies by never engaging in a big battle, but always just picking away at them and picking away and picking it away until they had to surrender. That idea is what's behind my thinking this week, is that we are infiltrated by this thing. And it does start with the Fabian Society in Britain. And I think that I can now feel pretty confident that the forces behind the scenes that have been doing things like assassinating President Kennedy are acting in concert with, or perhaps even at the direction of, these Fabians way back, and their descendants in their own philosophy. So this General Arthur Trudeau tried to raise the alarm, and I talked about him with Harley Schlanger this week of the LaRouche organization, and he was familiar with the story, and he said, yeah, this was one of those patriots that felt that he had to speak up and say something, and then he did, and then he got shot down for it. But his basic pitch was, the State Department, the executive branch have been infiltrated by Fabian socialists. And then he went on to name a number of these Fabian socialists, including the Dulles brothers and the usual suspects in the State Department of that time. Frank Wisner, who was the head of the Department of Plans, which was really the Department of Dirty Tricks. He was one of them that was accused of being a Fabian socialist. So are these people actually the tentacles of some conspiracy hatched in 1884 and just now coming to fruition? And if is that a story that you, as a person in the journalism business, think has legs? I'm trying to see if it's worth trying to really paint this picture in a broad way, so to try to wake people up to say, hey, what happened to our country? Well, have you thought about maybe that these Fabians were really serious and they really are doing it?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I think that you're onto something. I just finished reading Matthew Ehret's first volume. I think I have it right here. Uh, Oops, that's Tragedy and Hope Hitting the Ground. Volume 2, Volume 3. I
Yeah.
can't find Volume 1. That's right here.
I have not got his books yet. I admire his work. He's
Yeah,
somebody that is of a younger generation than me, but has been working on this longer than I have.
yeah. Well, so this is a first volume that I just finished, the Unfinished Symphony, and he talks about this, and he goes back even earlier than that, I think to 1865, and he talks about Huxley's X Society, which I find curiously interesting because dark journalist Daniel List, who's got a very a great channel on YouTube. One of his regular series is called is on X steganography. That is, he believes that a lot of the quote unquote secret science programs that we give X designations to come from technology that's either been hidden or occulted and held by elites, somehow controlled by elites, in order to be able to maintain, things like balance of power and stuff like that. I've gone off onto but one of the things that's interesting about Ehret is that he's got, I'm very much into. I've been studying hypnosis for about 4 years now, and hypnosis is about changing the frame in which people look at things. And when you and I talked last week, we were talking about, the Boaz and Jachin kind of dialectic where you take all of the world's problems and you present two solutions to people and tell them that that's choice or tell them that that's democracy.
Yeah.
And you wind up doing that. And it's interesting because Ehret, his frame for looking at the world is that you have two basic systems that are in conflict right now. And the revolutionary system is the American system because it's based on individual sovereignty. And you've got that up against the British Empire system, which is about kind of totalitarian control of the planet. And so you have this kind of individual, you have this, that when the United States was originally created, that there were true believers, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, John Madison, these guys were true believers in the idea that there could be a framework for individual sovereignty or for more individual sovereignty, as opposed to, top-down tyrannical control of resources and people and wealth. And so that what you really have is like this battle between these two systems. But just to occlude everything and to make everything complicated, to your point, I think that one of the and it probably came from the Masons. I'm not one of these people who think that the Masons as an organization are intrinsically evil, but I think that one of the things that Adam Weishaupt and Meyer Rothschild and Jacob Frank agreed on when they started like the Bavarian Illuminati is that rather than start their own organization, it was much easier to go and usurp and take over other organizations. And so they looked at whatever the strengths were of different organizations, and they started to take them over. The Masons was one of the first organizations that they targeted and they went after. So I'm not one of these people who thinks that all Masonic things are bad, but I do think that the Masons, like I'm not sure that the Jesuits necessarily started out as this evil kind of like organization either, but eventually they wound up. And again, I'm talking out of school. I haven't done enough research on the Jesuits to really know that, but I have this gut feeling about organizations in general. I don't think the United States State Department starts out as an evil organization. I don't think that the people who your father, when he joined the FBI, I didn't think that I don't think that he thought he was joining an evil organization. But I think that eventually what winds up happening is that these organizations do wind up getting usurped and taken over. And so that's when having a worldview, having an ideology. It's funny because the word ideological is used as a pejorative sometimes, but like the word tolerance, or discrimination. Not eating food that can kill you because you've discriminated against bad food. That's not a bad thing. So I'm
Well,
kind of
I don't want to denigrate the English language either.
yeah,
Just,
exactly.
matter of fact, I can't denigrate anything. I'd probably get a strike for saying that word.
For saying denigrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the world we live in, right? You can't words. I don't know. Words have meaning, I used to work for the Shoah Foundation Institute. I designed their online education system called Eyewitness, and I worked as a consultant at the Simon Wiesenthal Center. They had something called digital hate. They wanted to identify all of the hate groups on the internet, and I was consulting with them about that. But whenever that word tolerance came up, they were always talking about tolerance this and tolerance that, and I was always thinking, it's like Princess Bride or something. It's like, I don't think that word means what you think it means. A tolerance is a limit, right? If you're, and I learned that in machine shop when I was in junior high school, right? That you build things to certain limits, and if they're out of tolerance, that means that they're rejected. They don't work. It doesn't mean that you should just bend to whatever anybody's belief systems are,
Unless you're in the Army.
unless you're in the Army, right?
That's what happened to General Trudeau. Was a general. He's a 3-star general. He was the general at the Battle of Pork Chop Hill, which is a very famous, horrible disaster
In Korea.
In Korea, yes,
Yeah.
he was one of MacArthur's. He was a 3-star. Okay, so this is a serious war-fighting general who happens to believe in the individual sovereignty side of what you just described versus the totalitarian side, which that's the whole problem we have here, is that everybody loves the Queen of England, but she is the leader of the totalitarian side. So how do you go up against this blessed mother queen of the world without getting trashed by every media outlet in the world? Well, this is what happened to General Trudeau. He's told his troops basically his philosophy of what was going on in the world, which really tracked pretty well with the John Birch Society. So that tells you what he said. And that hit the newspapers. And for that, Alan Dulles got him fired by Kennedy on the theory that his speech injured the intelligence services, that it hurt the intelligence services of the United States. Well, the intelligence services of the United States is where the Fabians live.
Right.
And he was making a direct attack on them, and the Fabians were strong enough to get him shot down.
Well, so, yeah. Well, I mean, they in military warfare, after the invention of the airplanes, specifically, it's like if you had total air superiority, then you could basically control the battlefield. And I think that one of the things that Dulles understood better than most people is that media being used as basically story projection onto the public winds up becoming the air cover in a nonviolent war. And if you can craft the narrative, if you can create, I mean, it's why I got involved in this in the first place. Is I stood on a set one day with a Hasselblad and a model, wondering why when I pushed the button at a certain time, it was more likely that a woman would buy a sweater than if I pushed the button at another time. And it's because pictures count. It's because stories count. It's because media counts. All of these things wind up influencing the demos, right? And you can tell everyone that there's one person, one vote, but if those people are all being fed a line of BS, they don't have the information that they need in order to be able to make the appropriate decision. And like Joe McCarthy in the same period of time, I think Joe McCarthy was vindicated decades later by the Venona papers. Those and Angleton was still good friends with Kim Philby even after he defected back to the Soviet Union. So people were being fed. To this day, McCarthyism is an epithet, right?
Yes.
But
At the same time, it's everybody switched hats now. It's the go blue. It's the vote blue folks that are now the better dead than red crowd.
Right. Now, I think I probably said this the last time that I talked to you, but I discovered this guy, and I wanted to sidebar note about books. When I first started watching George, I always had a question, which was, how does he know all of this stuff, and how does he know that? And then after George met you, and you started talking about books, and you started pulling books off your bookshelf behind you, I thought, oh, there are books about this, and you started talking about the secret team, and that kind of led me down this rabbit hole, right? And there is a book section on the Duke Report that's largely inspired by the stuff that I learned from you, because I wanted to just kind of collect everything in one area. But I'm 65 years old, and my mind is still blown. I was talking to a guy last night who's a retired vice principal from the LAUSD, and he's just now coming to the point of realization that you and I were at 4 or 5 years ago. Oh, the world isn't really the way that I thought it was. And there's probably millions of people who are at that point right now.
Yeah.
And I discovered a guy a year ago named C. Wright Mills, who turns out to be a very prolific sociologist who wrote a lot of great stuff. And that he was a smart guy because the left accused him of being an anarchist, and the right accused him of being a communist. And he was really just anti-establishment. And people didn't actually understand that the establishment that he was against is the Carroll Quigley, Anglo-American establishment. That word establishment isn't abstract. It actually means something. And Mills said something that just kind of dumbfounded me, which was that America has always been a conservative country, but the values that they want to conserve are liberal: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all men are created equal. And so whenever you have this dialectic that's set up between conservatives and liberals, that unless you're really kind of specific about whatever it is, the issue that you're talking about, you create this this conversation that's effectively noise, right? Because people will fill in their own definition of whatever they think conservative is or whatever they think liberal is. And without the understanding that, again, if you take it back to, there's the totalitarian oriented people and there's the individual sovereignty oriented people. And that's really kind of the back and forth. That's the spectrum, right, that we're on.
And we have to just feed that that individual sovereignty side from with all the nourishment that we can give it, because this is the true tradition of America, is the rights of an individual. That's Jefferson, that's everybody, that's Washington. Nobody didn't say that the individual has rights, especially once they made it clear that they weren't going to sign the Constitution without a Bill of Rights attached to it. That comes from the division in Great Britain between the Hanoverians and the Jacobites. The Jacobites being the supporters of the Stuart dynasty, and the Hanoverians, of course, being the supporters of the financial powers that were coming and taking over the Great Britain through William of Orange. The great fraud, you just described it very well. I'd just like to put a little gloss on it from my point of view, is that the debate is between the two pillars of the top side. They're both, it's like and I call it the Keynesians versus the Austrian school. The Keynesians say, well, we can control the people better by giving them a financial system that we will manipulate and control, and we can tighten the credit, expand the credit, cut somebody out. We can favor these people. They'll never know it. We'll run it all from behind the scenes, and everybody will just accept it because
because we'll feed news stories into the news, why the market is moving the way that it is, that doesn't have anything to do with why the market is moving the way it is, right?
Voila. And then on the other side, you have your Hayek, your Austrian school, which basically says screw the serfs. Sometimes you have a good crop of serfs and they live for a while, and sometimes they just die off. But screw them, because we're not responsible for all of these millions of useless eaters. And that's your Henry Kissinger school, and your Brzezinski school, and the people that would do that. But the tragedy is that the whole debate is between this one. We're the liberals, give free food to everybody, versus we're the conservatives. You can't make me pay for your student debts, and that debate is just rattling behind everybody's brains. And you can say, well, which side am I on? Which side am I on? No, you're not on either of those sides. That's
Right.
the fake debate. That's
Right.
how they control us from their Fabian castles behind the scenes. And all the rest of us are like watching our televisions going, like watching a tennis match, bap, 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 biff, bop. Trump said this. No, Biden is stupid. No, Trump is stupid, back and forth. That is exactly what you're fighting against. That's what I think we have to let everybody, be aware of. So let's look at something specific for a minute.
Well, can I just interject one thing? Because, like I said, I have been studying hypnosis for like 4 years now. And I have been trying out different, hypnotists use scripts, basically. And the whole idea of hypnosis is that what you do is you use words coming out of your mouth in order to get the person that is listening to the words coming out of your mouth to get into an alpha state, at which point you can make a suggestion, right? And if you're good, then the suggestion sticks and it changes the frame that the person who you're talking to uses. And so what I've been playing around with this script the last couple of days, and I used it on 3 people last night when I was out at the Bluffs. And the funny thing is about hypnosis is that it works even if the people that you are talking to know that you're doing it to them. So I don't have any problem sharing this. The reason I'm sharing with you now is because I think it works pretty good. And if anybody is watching this, they can kind of figure it out for themselves. But I ask, what I do is I say, I talk to people. I say, look, the problem with, they talk about democracy. I said, we don't have democracy. And they go, what do you mean we don't have democracy? And I said, well, the media controls. It doesn't matter how many political parties you have. It doesn't matter if you've got a parliament. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States and you've got the Republicans and Democrats. It doesn't really matter, because as long as you've got media that reinforces this dialectic, that there's 2 sides to whatever issue you've got, then people are always only going to make 2 decisions. And they go, well, why is that bad? And I look at them and I say, if I made you the king, I said to my friend Jamie, I said, if I made you the emperor of Santa Monica and I gave you 2 problems to solve, homelessness and cleaning up the beach, I'm sure that in your infinite wisdom, that you would probably go and you'd think about 4 or 5. You go and you gather some information and you would find the 4 or 5 different ways that you could solve homelessness in Santa Monica or cleaning the beach, and that you would come up with a good decision. And he said, yeah. And I said, but you looked at 4 or 5 different things. You didn't look at 2. And that's the suggestion, right? And at that point, when I said that, this is a guy who I've been having political arguments with for, I don't know, 5, 6 years now, maybe longer than that. But he has stopped pushing back on me because I framed it that way. There's a couple of other friends that I met last night, and I tried the same script on them. And the idea is this, that you make them the center of the world, right? You basically make them sovereign in the example that you're giving, okay? And then you tell them that they have to solve the problem, and you let them know that that even they would come up with more than 2 solutions to whatever problem that they've got. And then the light bulb goes off. So I just thought I'd share that. I'm still working on the script. I'm still, working out the kinks in it, but it seems to be working. People seem to be understanding, oh, this left-right dialectic is really how they control us.
It is. And, one wonders, did the founding fathers just not know that? Did they miss it, or were they aware of it all along and thought, well, you know what, Benjamin, you got the press in Philadelphia, Sam, you can cover Boston, and we'll keep the people down, one thing we can do that would really help would be if you, President Adams, could just throw some mud at Thomas Jefferson, in the press, then everybody will get polarized. And
and arrest anybody who disagrees with you in the press.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Didn't Adams sign the Sedition Act?
That was Adams, yes.
Yeah.
Where and so provoking that side to the Jefferson side in favor of Jefferson, and keeping that, it's either Adams or Jefferson, this one or this one. Is there anything in between, that might actually help the common person? Well,
right.
I don't know. Let's see. Jefferson, how many slaves did he have? He was fairly well off, I guess. Adams, successful merchant, lawyer. He was fairly well off. What about the rest of these people, And then they all get together and have a rebellion in Pennsylvania, and George Washington assembles the biggest army he's ever had.
Right. Well, and Alexander Hamilton raises taxes to pay the army to go collect the bill for the army from the people who are revolting against paying the taxes.
That's right. And
yeah.
and that was, that was the executive power demanding its due, saying, hey, we said we will enforce the law, and we are going to enforce the law. And, sometimes it takes an example, but I think, in the long run, the country benefited from having a strong executive at that time, because it was, as we've seen the history of the 19th century, that foreign forces have been trying to pull us apart for decades, and that brings us right back to Britain, in my opinion. But let's look for a minute at probably the biggest story still going on in the news anyway, if I'm right, and that is the war in Ukraine.
Okay.
I only look at sources that I think are giving me, the real dope on it, and that means that the Russians are winning. The Russians are really, really crushing the Ukrainian army. And but that the American media and the British media and the media of Europe are telling the opposite story, that the Ukrainians are doing great, and they have this big offensive, and they're going to take back this, and they're going to every single inch of Ukrainian territory will be restored to them, and they're very, very always asking for more arms from America. And then the American people seem to be happy with, okay, we've got to crush this tyrant Putin because he invaded a sovereign country. And that's not that narrative is still driving American policy, and the public seems to be behind it.
Is the public behind it?
Well, that's what I'm at.
I think the media is behind it.
Right,
But
so
I don't think that I've met a person. I mean, I see stickers. I see people who are virtue signaling with yellow and blue flags and stickers and stuff. But I haven't run into anyone in person that is a Ukrainian fanboy. I mean, my family's from Kiev. I mean, I should be. I'm not. I had a bunch of family members killed at Baba Yar by the Nazis. Like, uh, I, I kind of try to look at all of that stuff in a geopolitical way, and I don't think that no. Well, to answer your question, Ukraine's not winning. There isn't any way that they can beat the Russians. And that's why I think that the gambit that was set up 2 days ago, that was the lead story on the Duke Report on June 19th, Lithuania may have lit the fuse on World War III, is, again, a provocation, an escalation, an attempt to pull NATO into the war that they've always wanted, since 1946, that they've been planning for, that they've been, war gaming out. And I was talking to George about the fact that, I didn't realize that Kaliningrad was a separate, like, you had to go through Lithuania and Georgia in order to get to Russia.
it's like going to West Berlin and through East Berlin.
Well, it's like Danzig. Okay, so after World War I, East Prussia was given to Poland. So Poland, the country Poland, didn't exist before the Treaty of Versailles, and they gave East Prussia, or not the shape that it's in, right. And they gave East Prussia to Poland, but Germany cried foul, and they wanted to keep Danzig. So Danzig became a quote unquote international city, and there was a corridor. The Danzig corridor between Germany and Danzig. Danzig is which is now called Gdansk. It's right next to Kaliningrad. It's like they're right next to each other. Like, yeah. It's like the same exact.
They're in the same bay off of the Baltic Sea.
Right, exactly. And so it's almost like the exact same. Well, that's how World War I, like in Europe, officially started when the Germans invaded Poland, right? Mm-hmm. So is World War III going to officially start when the Russians go and try to secure their corridor to Kaliningrad? Of course, it doesn't have the same kind of geopolitical significance, because NATO clearly controls the Baltic. I think. I mean, you could sink a lot of ships in there, but you're not going to be moving a lot of grain and ore through the Baltic if there's a war going on there. So,
agreed. But I don't think Putin is going to take the bait. He knows that this is an invitation to having a NATO all-out war, mm-hmm. and I don't think he's going to take the bait. But it is indicative of the provocations that continue. Another provocation I noted was the attack on this little island off of Odessa that everybody calls Snake Island, mm-hmm. That recently happened, and there was a drone attack, and it appears that an American drone, a Global Hawk or something like that can fly real high, that the Ukrainian army didn't have, was flying above this, and obviously sending intelligence information to the Ukrainian side to help them guide their drones that were attacking the Russian base on this island. That to me is another indication that we're going to poke the bear. We're going to keep on poking and poking and poking. And I'm sorry to say but it is our army. It's our technology, and when we send them, the latest in technological weaponry, it's very provocative to see that the United States is providing, first-rate, latest gear that can shoot farther and do more damage than perhaps the Russians had anticipated.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look high enough on any of these technologies, they're almost all working off of satellite systems that are our satellite systems. So our when we give somebody a weapon system that is dependent upon an American, uh, 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 s- even if it's just a regular satellite, a GPS satellite, if it's dependent upon that, are we complicit? Are we not neutral? Are we actually being active participants in this war? I think probably so.
Well, now going to focus you, if I may, on the sense of what's going on in California, because I have no handle on what's going on in California. But to me, it's always been uh, it's 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 the most attractive state in the union in my mind. From all the surfer music to everything else, and the beautiful sunsets. You had some photos yesterday on your Twitter about how gorgeous it is there, and the beautiful people and the culture and this different everything is just a very, very attractive place. But it has a government that it seems to be completely dominated by true believers in the deep state philosophy, and exploiting the pension plan of CalPERS, and putting all of the people of California at risk of, well, for instance, the jabs, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
I don't see, the folks that you talk to, that they're not gung ho to win the Ukraine war. They're not saying we should take down Russia because they're the evil empire. But still, California seems to be supporting the narrative in a way that's just so chilling that it just gives me that approach avoidance syndrome that's uncomfortable.
Well, Rand is here, and uh, the the thing that's in and Santa Monica seems to be ground zero, which is which is one city that way. I live in Pacific Palisades, which is technically Los Angeles, and I live in the Illuminati neighborhood, where the people who make and produce and write and act in television and movies and motion pictures with families live. So the Palisades is a very family oriented community. So if you if you run a movie studio and you want your kids to grow up in a neighborhood where they can ride bikes, then the Palisades is where you live. The People's Republic of Santa Monica, which is there's a canyon that separates Santa Monica from the Pacific Palisades, is it's a crap show right now. They built a train from downtown Los Angeles. They called it the Subway to the Sea, and it opened about 3 or 4 years ago. And the people who were fighting that thought, well, who's going to be riding the train from the most impoverished areas in Los Angeles to the beach? And lo and behold, they build the train, and the crime rate it goes up in Santa Monica in a year. I think it goes up 19% from the time that the train started until they started from the time the train. In 1 year after the train started, the crime rate in Santa Monica went up 19%. Santa Monica is kind of the Agenda 21 model for housing. So all of the old buildings in Santa Monica are being knocked down, and they're building these brutalist multi-use buildings that have they look like they're built with Legos. Like that's the aesthetic. They're really gross and ugly. And the first floor uh, is always commercial, and then you've got residential above it. And it's because they don't want people moving around. And if they do move around, uh, uh, they want people taking public transit. So they're doing all of these things in California, Los Angeles, and Santa Monica specifically that they call traffic calming, right? Basically, they've taken away the right turn lane in every intersection. So a street may have 2 lanes going in each direction. Okay. And when you get to the signal, all of the lanes are squeezed down in order to go across the intersection in 1 lane. Okay. So they're purposely creating gridlock. Okay. It's all by design. In these same neighborhoods, they have these little robots that look like a igloo cooler with wheels and sensors, and people are ordering food, like fast food. There are these what I call kind of collective fast food places. So normally in a normal city, there would be a Kentucky Fried Chicken and a Burger King and a McDonald's and whatever it is that you've got, and they'd be in separate buildings. They'd be separate restaurants, right? So they have this thing called Colony in West Los Angeles, and it's like 10 fast food restaurants, the kitchens for 10 fast food restaurants in one building.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only takeout or delivery. And there's one counter for all of it. And you can't walk in and order. You can only order with an app or online. And they're using these things as the distribution centers for these little robots that are being used in order to deliver, a ham sandwich or something.
So a robot walks down the street with your ham sandwich?
It rolls down the street. I did, if I can find it on my Twitter feed. Now, my Twitter feed automatically, my Twitter feed automatically deletes, I think, after 90 days. So it might have been more than 90 days that I shot a video. But my wife and I were walking down the street in Santa Monica or West Los Angeles one day, and we saw this robot rolling towards us, and I thought, this is like out of a movie or something. Like, I couldn't believe it, but I see these things all the time now. And what they're, people think it's cute and it's convenient and it's all this other stuff, but it's like they're trying to get rid of people, right? They want you in your cubicle. They want you in your little bubble, and they will bring you your food pellet,
Yeah.
So anyway, so Santa Monica, West Los Angeles is kind of like this microcosm. And then I live in this like Zardoz, like elitist community where, people are a little upset that the price of food has a can of Progresso soup. When I started putting food away, I've always kind of kept extra food around, but I really started getting serious about it 6 months ago. Progresso soup was 99 cents a can. It's $2.50 a can now. The price of food is a little crazy, but it's interesting because the rich people who send their nannies to Gelson's to go buy the groceries, I don't think they notice.
No.
The selections is less. Gelson's is a grocery store that was written by somebody did an essay on it. Joan Didion did a famous essay on Gelson's and how it was the most perfect grocery store in the world. And the thing is about Gelson's is that they always front everything. That is, the people who work there are constantly pulling all of the merchandise up to the front. So it always looks like the shelves are full.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed at Gelson's is that behind all of the stuff that's fronted, the spaces behind things are getting bigger, deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like, Gelson's is very good at looking like they have lots of merchandise. Ralph's, which is owned by Kroger, which is also in town here, not so much. They're probably a third of their shelf spaces is empty right now. It's very odd. And the Californians, to answer your question, that are walking around, they're kind of stunned. I think a lot of people, and my wife thinks that maybe the jab affects people's cognition. We don't know, but it seems like the people who are driving in the cars, it really is kind of turning into a Grand Theft Auto video game at this point. Going to the store and not getting in an accident. People are kind of like wandering across the street, looking at their phones, jaywalking. It's an adventure every time you get in the car, and it makes you not want to get in the car.
Frightening. Yeah. And that is the future as predicted or desired by the Fabians. That nobody will own anything, and we'll all be happy because we'll all be either happily doing our assigned tasks, or we'll be enjoying some great holographic videos in our cubicles and taking all of the latest exciting drugs to make us feel good. That's the future they want for us, and that's the future that we have to fight against. And you're one of the great fighters, Peter. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, John. Thank you for having me.
All right. And we'll see you again soon. Everybody have a great afternoon. And thanks a lot for being with us. Check out our calendar over at screamingospreys.com. And don't forget to subscribe to thedukereport.com.